This is for part B, effects of tenderizers on meat. So here I have my flank steak already cut into 4 equal pieces. I have pineapple, unseasoned meat tenderizer, and I have olive oil and my meat tenderizer right here. Now I have my pieces of pineapple ready to blend. Here I have all of my tenderization techniques labeled. So this one's gonna be without treatment. This one is gonna be mechanical tenderizer, commercial tenderizer, and pulverized fresh pineapple. This is what all of the steaks look like after being in the oven for about 7 minutes. So this one is no treatment, and then this one is the commercial tenderizer. This one is the mechanical tenderizer, and then this one is the pulverized fresh pineapple. This is the cut of flank steak with no treatment, and in terms of appearance, there were some dark stripes on the top of this flank steak, and the juices were observable on the bottom before I cut into it. And there's a pinkish color inside of the steak as well. And also too, there's a stringy appearance that you can notice inside. And in terms of juiciness, there was some juiciness present in this flank steak. And like I said, you could see that before I cut into it. And the tenderness of this was not really present. It was not very tender at all. And I had a hard time cutting through this piece with my knife. And when I was eating it too, I noticed that I liked the flavor of it, but it was much more difficult to chew compared to all the other steaks that I had done. Now this is the flank steak with mechanical tenderizer used, and I noticed that in terms of appearance, it's a pretty dark striped appearance on the top, and also too, there was pink present in the inside of this as well, since I cooked all of these meats the same way. And there's not as much juiciness compared to the other pieces at this point. And also too, for tenderness, I had a hard time cutting through this piece with my knife. Although for flavor, it was a little bit easier to chew, but I noticed that using the tenderizer helped because it broke up the connective tissue and it had good flavor, but I just didn't add spices to this one. This is with the commercial tenderizer, and I noticed that the appearance of this was juicy on top. There was some present, and also there was some darkness, but also some lighter shades of color that I noticed. And the interior is pink, which you can see here, so that's present. And although I will say that this was not very juicy, but there were some juices that were present, so there's a little bit of juice on this. And this was very difficult to cut into with my knife when I had done that, and so there was not much tenderness that was present, but this was a little easier to chew than the mechanical tenderizer and a more desirable flavor compared to the mechanical and no treatment. This is the pulverized fresh pineapple, and for the appearance, it looks a little bit like there was a glazed appearance on the bottom, which I took a picture of, and there's some dark and light color on the top, as you can see, and the pink interior is also present, and there are some juices that are present in this as well, as you can see. And also too, it's more than the meat tenderizer and the mechanical, the meat tenderizer that was commercial and the mechanical tenderizer. And I had a hard time cutting into this with my knife, so there wasn't much tenderness. But I noticed when I ate this, it was a little bit easier to chew because the acid in the pineapple broke the fibers, although this was not my favorite because I do not like pineapples.
Overall thoughts from part B of this lab, the effects of tenderizers on meat. So what I had done for this lab is I obtained the required ingredients, which were 8 ounces of a tough cut of meat, brisket, chuck, or flank steak, and I ended up using flank steak. And then I needed to use unseasoned meat tenderizer, which I did, and then I also had my fresh pineapple and oil, and I also had my meat mallet tenderizer. So what I had done is I cut the meat into 4 equal pieces, or about 2 ounces per section. And then I prepared each piece of meat to compare artificial tenderization techniques. So one of them was going to be no treatment. And then for mechanical tenderizer, I had that ready. And what I did is I tenderized the beef by patting it dry and laying it on a flat surface. And then I started in the middle and worked my way out, pounding the meat with my meat mallet. And the goal was not to punch holes, but to leave dents that were breaking up the grain. So I had done that. And then for the next part was commercial meat tenderizer powder. So I sprinkled that powder evenly over the meat and I pierced the surface a couple of times so that the enzyme could penetrate. And then finally for the pulverized fresh pineapple, I processed the fruit pieces until I had enough juice to marinate the cut of meat that I wanted to tenderize. So that was complete. And I also put the meat in that I wanted to tenderize in the shallow pan, and I poured the juiced pineapple over that meat, and I was able to cover that completely. And so I marinated that for around 10 to 15 minutes. And then I also prepared the oven and I cooked it to the level of doneness that I had desired. And I know that the temperature and length of cooking varied depending on the cut of meat and the level of thickness. So I'd done it for about the same time that I did for the previous lab, which was around 6 to 9 minutes, and it turned out fine. After completing this lab and reflecting back on it, I feel that the results were what I had expected, and I really don't feel that I ran into any difficulty completing this lab. I feel like everything turned out the way it needed to. I will say that this lab brought home the point that there are different tenderization techniques, and I was never aware that you can use pulverized fresh pineapple as a tenderization technique, so I thought that that was interesting. Although when I was tasting my flank steak that I used for part B of this lab, and I tasted the ones that were no treatment, mechanical tenderizer, commercial meat tenderizer, and the pulverized fresh pineapple, I liked everything except for the pulverized fresh pineapple because I really don't like pineapples. But again, like I said, I did think it was interesting because I was like, oh, I didn't know that you can use pulverized fresh pineapple, but I guess that's one way to do it. So I thought that that was very cool. And tenderization is a vital process, and it's definitely important to make sure that you have improved palatability and the sensory attributes of meat. So it definitely brings home the point that taking tenderization seriously, depending on what you're using it for, is very important. And I enjoyed completing part A and part B of this lab, and I love steak, so I feel like this was perfect for me, but I feel like everything went the way it was supposed to, and I'm pretty happy with how everything turned out.